Hello, everyone. This is me live with Tokini Andy, who's going to introduce himself very soon. I'm going to ask him a few questions to for you to get to know him, essentially. And for me to get to know him as well, because I'm sure I don't know everything, not yet.
Probably not.
And then, yeah, so what we'll do is we'll probably do three questions at a time and then read the comments. So if you have any reactions, any questions that you want to ask, then just do that. And then, yeah, is that a good introduction?
Sounds good.
Okay, so my first question
Mm.
is, who are you? So, introduce your channel,
Who
who you
am
are,
I?
your background, etc.
All right, sounds good. So, my name is Andy. I run the channel Tokini Andy, as you saw in the title. I started off Tokini Andy as sort of like a vlog about Nagano, Japan, the city I live in, because I really love the city. So I sort of wanted to show people around it. But for some reason, that turned into a Japanese language learning channel slowly over time. And as the year went on, I've been doing it for about a year. I niched down further and further until I just became the Genki guy. So now pretty much all I do is Genki lessons, and I play some
Hmm.
Japan related video games, I guess, live on my channel, and that's basically what I do. But
Yeah,
yeah, I teach Japanese on YouTube.
I followed some of your games. Yeah, it was quite fun when I was at
Yeah,
work.
yeah, oh, yeah. You came when I was streaming the Hiragan or no kanji game.
Yeah, how
Came
did
with
this
you.
one
Those
go
were
in the
fun.
end? Did you complete it?
I did. It got pretty nuts at the end, man. It was an interesting story. I can't believe I did it. It was 25 hours of that game. I don't think I ever would have done it on my own if I wasn't doing it live with other people,
Yeah.
which is a lot of fun. Have you ever streamed games before?
No, but I think I might do that at some point. It's
Mm,
definitely at the back of my mind. But one day, maybe there's gonna be a
yeah,
surprise. I'll announce it
it
when
could be
I
fun.
do that.
I'll be there.
You'll be there. I was wondering,
Yeah.
why Nagano?
Why Nagano? Yeah. When I first came to Japan, my company, like the company that I got into to get here, they just sent me to Suzaka, it was called, which is in Nagano Prefecture. It's about 10 kilometers from Nagano City.
Hmm.
I had told them when I joined because I just wanted to get here. I didn't care where. I was like, I'll go anywhere. I'll go to the middle of nowhere. That's fine. Because most people will say like, oh, we want to go to Tokyo. We want to go to Osaka. And there's not that many branches. So
Hmm.
they don't get in. They're just like, oh, I'll go anywhere. And they sent me to Suzaka. And I don't know. It, it worked. It was very compatible with my personality. It's kind of like I don't know if you know like Denver, Colorado, or any. It's kind of like that. It's the
How is
mountains
it?
are really close.
All right.
The mountains are really close, but it's still a city.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm in the city. I can go out with my friends easily if I wanted to, but I can also ride my bike 20 minutes that way and climb a mountain. So it's a very, I don't know. You can do a lot of different things here.
Mm-hmm.
So I just
So,
really enjoyed it.
so you like that it's not a full-on big city, but rather it's sort of city,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
also kind of quiet and yeah.
Yeah, I get a little bit of, but the best of both worlds. I could never live in Tokyo, man. It's just too many people.
I've never been yet. Is
Nuts.
it that bad?
No, it's not bad, but I can't imagine living there.
Mm.
Like, it's there's so many people and everything is packed together so tightly. It's just like constantly moving, and it's so expensive. Like,
Mm.
just there's I can't think of any reason why I would want to live there. Visiting
Mm.
is fun, but living there, no
Yeah.
thanks. Yeah.
So that takes me to my second question. So how
Yeah.
long have you been learning Japanese for?
Ooh. So I came to Japan in 2012. So it was 8 years ago. But so it was May. So it was wait, what's the date? Oh wow.
14th.
Exactly 8 years ago. I
Really?
think I think it might be exactly 8 years
Wow.
since I first came to Japan. That's crazy.
That's a
Um
long time.
yeah. I didn't even realize it. So anyway, but I didn't know any like I didn't learn Japanese, start really practicing until I was here for about 6 months.
Right.
So 6 months I did nothing. I just hung out with my English speaking friends. And then one day I was just like, wait a second. I am wasting my time. I'm in another country. I'm not even gonna bother trying to speak to the people who live here. So I guess 7.5 years. 7.5 years. Yeah.
Interesting. So when you moved to Japan, were you not really thinking about learning Japanese at first?
I was. That was actually a big reason for it. Like I wanted to come over here, make some money, go travel, but I also wanted to learn. I wanted to be a polyglot. That was sort of what I wanted to be, and I wanted to travel many places and learn languages. Kind of like I don't. What's the guy's name that did the 3-month Fluent in 3 months website?
Benny Lewis?
Benny Lewis.
Mhm.
Yeah, like I wanted to do what he did basically, then I came here and I loved it so much I never left. But anyway, when I got here, I was like, okay, I'm gonna learn Japanese. But then I made so many friends who weren't Japanese,
Mhm.
so I didn't have any drive to. So I sort of had to go out of my way, despite living here in the country, to go study it. Like I just had to sort of distance myself from the people I had become friends with, so that I could focus on that, which is kind of counterintuitive, right? Like I'm living in Japan, I should have no problem
Yeah, you'd
practicing
think.
Japanese, but you'd think, but it's not the case.
So how did you get started then?
Yeah, I tried so many different things when I first started. Like my goal when I started was to speak. Like I didn't really care that much about reading or anything at first. I just wanted to be able to speak to people. That was my whole thing. So I started out trying to just speak what I learned. So I did like Skype lessons with, I found a company that was offering Skype lessons before I discovered iTalki. But then as soon as I discovered iTalki, I did everything on there. Just I came up with my own things that I wanted to talk about, like grammar and stuff that I was studying. I had I have this book down here, a dictionary of basic Japanese grammar. I would just like learn a grammar point, make sentences, get on Skype and read them out to my teacher and be like, "Is this right?" And I force them to speak only Japanese to me, despite not like understanding anything they were saying, and they didn't enjoy it, the teachers, but I'm paying for it. So
Yeah.
and then I spent a lot of time on just vocabulary and kanji and stuff, and like remembering the kanji and shadowing and lots of different stuff, but mostly Skype lessons.
And do you think that method worked well for you? Like, is there maybe a point where you changed, maybe? Like the way you studied it or learnt it?
Yeah, I changed up like all the time. Like every couple months I'd get really bored with whatever I was doing, so I would change the whole thing, like my whole process, I would change it completely. But the only thing that never did change was Anki. Like I never stopped using Anki. It was always reviewing kanji vocabulary for the whole time. Yeah, Anki. I love it. I still promote it. It's got its faults and there's other cool things out there, but I still find it to be, I don't know what I would have done without it, to be honest. I'm not into like actual hard flashcards or anything.
Yeah.
Like I definitely like to be able to just pull out my phone and flip through whatever I need. So yeah, I didn't change it up too much. I found it, like you asked if I found it worked well, and it did. I think it was really well. I worked really well. I think if I were to go back and do it again, I would probably spend a little bit more time learning some grammar from an English speaker who knew it better than me, like grammar, some other points. I think I maybe missed. I think it took too long to learn certain points that would have been a lot simpler if I just let the teacher speak to me in English. Like, I might have been a little bit too strict about that. Like it helped my listening and it helped my speaking, but I might this time around be a little bit more lax on the teacher and let them speak English to me.
So does that mean that the teachers would explain to you the grammar in Japanese? Oh
Yeah.
wow. How did that go?
Yes. It was a learning experience. It could be very frustrating, but also it was cool. Like it's surprising how much you can express with just like gestures. I don't know, they would write it out if I couldn't understand a word or something in the chat, which is nice with Skype lessons and stuff like that. But when I was learning, like my third month, I quit English for a month. That's of learning. So it was my third month learning. I'm like, I'm not speaking English this month, even with people I know who speak English. I still had to work with people who spoke English. So they'd like ask me something and I'd be like I told them beforehand, before the month started, I was like, I'm sorry guys, but I'm gonna respond to you in Japanese. Like I made this promise to myself. So most of my English speaking friends didn't speak Japanese. So I'm sitting there, like I remember I worked at an Eikaiwa at the time, which is an English language school. and I had just one coworker who was also an American, and she didn't speak any Japanese. She'd been there a year longer than me, but she didn't really care about studying. So we'd be in a classroom just talking because we'd have 4 hours before first class.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd be trying to have a conversation with me, and I'm just responding in Japanese. She'd be like, I don't know what that means, man. So I'd be like doing gestures and like making diagrams on the blackboard. And eventually she'd get it. She'd be like, oh, I know what that means. Oh my God, I learned a word. And it was really fun.
So
I really highly recommend quitting your native language for a month or two when you're learning. If you want to get a nice boost.
It sounds like that's how you became a teacher. You were teaching Japanese to other people.
Yeah, pretty much. That's why I came here. That when I was walking across Spain. So I walked. I don't know if you've heard of the what's it called again? Camino de Santiago.
Yeah.
From Sevilla to
Santiago de Compostela. Yeah.
So usually most people do it from France, but I started down in Sevilla and walked up there. So it was, I don't know about nowadays, but back in 2011, it wasn't, I think maybe 8,000 people per year did it. So very few people, but almost all of them were German. Like I'd say 90% of the people walking that path were German. So a lot of them were trying to learn English. So I was helping them as I walked. Like we'd be walking for 30 kilometers and we had nothing else to do. So I'd be like correcting their English. And I was like, oh, I don't want to go back to IT, which is what I studied in school.
All right.
I think I'll try teaching English abroad. So that's what led to that.
Interesting. And how long do you think it took you for you to be comfortable enough that you weren't really actively learning Japanese? Does that make sense?
Like where I pretty much stopped learning was probably after 2 years. So maybe 2.5. Like my second year here, I decided I was tired of teaching English in a little eikaiwa, like the after school system. So I started working at a kindergarten just as like a kindergarten homeroom teacher in an immersion class. So I was teaching kids origami and stuff. So when I got there, my Japanese was already passable. But when I got there, all the other teachers were Japanese. All the documents of like for meetings and stuff were in Japanese. And I had to go to all those meetings and participate in them. And I had to write a report every single day in Japanese. Wow. Handwrite. So it was my entire life basically became in Japanese. Like my day to day, not 24 hours, but my work day became all in Japanese. So within a couple months of that, I was able to quit studying because I was just picking up so much from talking with the kids all day or talking with my co-teachers at meetings and stuff that I didn't actually have to actively go out and study anymore. So I'd say 2 years probably.
Wow. Must have been daunting to do a job like that completely in Japanese. Wow. I would find it so scary. How was it?
Well, so I found it really exciting. Like before I actually started working there, I took a job on the weekends at a bar in Nagano City, like an Okinawan bar. I had gone out drinking with some friends one night, and we went to this place late at night, and my friend jokingly asked the owner of the restaurant, he's like, can I work here? And he's like, yeah, sure. And my friend's like, yeah, I'm just kidding. And I was like, I'm serious. I want to work here. And he's like, yeah, okay, come next weekend. So I wanted to practice my Japanese. So like I literally started that working in the bar to practice. And that was daunting. That was scary because it was just random people coming in that you've never met before. And you had to take their orders properly and make their drinks properly in a language that I wasn't quite. Yeah, that was hard. It was fun though. But so like my Japanese was okay. It wasn't so bad that it was terrifying to be working in Japanese, but it wasn't perfect. I have the original books of the reports. So like if you look at my reports from my first year and then like my 4th year, you'd think a different person wrote them for sure. So
that'd be interesting for you to look at them and see the progress.
It's so interesting. I look, I'm like, oh my God, I thought I was good back then, but I wasn't.
It reminds me of a video idea I want to do is to look at my English homework from when I was a kid and be like, what was I thinking?
Yeah. That would be so good.
I'll do a video like that at some point.
When would you say that you became fluent in English? Like that you considered yourself fluent?
I think I considered myself fluent before I arrived to England because I was comfortable enough. But I did have done oh God, I had done English. I had done a degree in English before coming to England, and we were like immersed in English like every day. We had 20 hours of lessons, pretty much in English, sometimes in French, but mostly in English. And we had to take notes about like historical events. So the first time I was like, oh my God, this is so tiring. I mean, you probably had the same thing. You know, people just like giving you presentations.
Tiring when you're native.
Exactly. So people giving you presentations on a specialized topic, not like everyday things. For like an hour. The first hour for me, I was like, I'm so tired. Like it's so tiring. Like my brain is like, what's happening?
Going on every day.
Yeah, but then obviously it gets better. Your brain, you know, you get trained now, and I don't have that problem anymore. But although
I would still have difficulty in a situation like that. Yeah, it'll do it.
It was a learning curve for sure.
I bet.
And then I wanted to ask you, you wanted to do, I think, JLPT N2 and N1, I believe. Is this still on the table?
Yeah. Nope. So there's a couple of reasons for that. 2 or 3. One is they were canceled because of the current outbreak. So I can't take them even if I want to. The second is I realized I took some practice tests and that N2 is probably, it's kind of pointless. I could probably pass it without an issue. So N1 would be the target, and summertime is too early for N1 because N1 is so specialized. Like there's important grammar and words in it, but not stuff that you really use in conversation. So like it's very like newspaper official documentation type Japanese. So I'd actually have to study hard for that. So I still was considering doing it in December, but then so my TikTok sort of went nuts, and then I started a Patreon, which basically is a full-time job despite also having a job. So I don't have any time for personal study. So I've sort of, that was my goal, but I've sort of pushed that one off until I finish all the content that I want to create, which is probably 1.5 to 2 years away. So after that, I'm going to go for N1.
Right. So do you think your current level is far from N1 level? And what would be
it's pretty far.
What's lacking for you to get there, you think?
What's lacking is probably my reading, I would say. My reading, most likely. Because the thing with the JLPT is there's no spoken, there's listening. Like I could pass the N1 listening. I think I'd get perfect, like almost perfect on N1 listening. But that's not the problem. Getting perfect on N1 doesn't make up for the fact that there's kanji in the N1 that just aren't used in everyday life. There's words that aren't used in everyday life. I don't read the newspaper in English, so obviously I don't read it in Japanese. So there's just, I'd have to study more like specifically for the N1. A lot of people say, and this isn't entirely true, but there is some truth to it, that when you study for the N1, you study for the N1. You're not studying Japanese anymore. You're studying for the test. Because a lot of the language, like the majority of people will never use. But there is useful stuff on it. So I'd like to, because I think some of it would be very useful for me, especially since I'm teaching it now. But I am teaching to beginners mostly. So most of that, I don't think I'll ever get to a point where I'm teaching extremely advanced Japanese, but we'll see. But yeah.
Do you think the N1 is actually useful? I mean, I'm sure, anything is useful, but do you think it's actually useful in terms of getting a job or, more practically speaking?
For that, it absolutely is. Yeah. If you're looking for a job, especially if you're going for translating, if you want to be a translator, then you should get it. Yeah. It's probably very useful for that. Like, I have no desire to do translation. It doesn't sound fun to me at all. Maybe interpreting or something might be fun. I could see doing that. Sounds fun.
Interpreting sounds fun.
Sounds stressful. It sounds more fun than translating, like paper. It's just not my thing. So for those kind of people, absolutely. For people who are just trying to, want to be able to communicate while they're in Japan for a study abroad or something, like it's not necessary. Is it going to make your Japanese better? Yeah, of course. But there are people, it depends on your goals, 100%. Because there's tons of people out there, I think, who've passed N1, but would have a hard time holding a conversation smoothly.
That reminds me of a
very
video
real thing.
on Mount versus Japan's channel, which I didn't actually watch yet because the sound was also kind of difficult for me to watch. I don't know, whatever. But he was making a video about, I don't know if it wasn't him, it was someone interviewed who said that I've got N1 still not fluent or something. So do you think it's actually possible to have N1, which sort of sounds like you would be very fluent, but then actually not be fluent?
It absolutely is. Absolutely. 100%. If you have N1, you're probably going to have no problem watching TV shows, reading. You're going to be great at reading. But speaking doesn't mean you can speak. I mean, some people disagree with this, and I'm just finding out that people disagree with this now, but recently. But like speaking, in my opinion, is a different skill. Like you need to be able to understand what's being said to you to speak, but you also need practice saying stuff, like to get the rhythms down of what's being said, to understand, you know, how people are understanding you, whether you're saying things right or not. So like you can get M1 without ever saying a single word in your life. Like there's, because is the European standardized, what are they called, like C2, C1, stuff like that?
Yeah.
Is there spoken
They
test?
should be. Normally they assess on the 4 skills, so that's speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So to have the full
So like
C2 level, you have to be assessed on the 4 skills.
Right. Which means those are a far better way of grading, I think, language learning than the JLPT. JLPT is 100% just listening and reading, not even writing, just recognition and reading.
That's surprising, though. You would think writing and speaking would be one of the most, well, I don't know if it's most important, but definitely important. Right?
You would think, which is why there's a lot of critique of the JLPT. It's clearly not enough. But with that said, that's very, very common in Japan. I've read that doctors in Japan, they don't have practicals until they graduate. So like you can become a surgeon, you can graduate from medical school as a surgeon and never have cut a person open in your life. Or anything, like even a cadaver, like nothing. It's all written. So it's not at all. Don't go to the hospital here, man. So yeah. So it's par for the course here. There's lots of things that are strange about this country, and that's one of them. But it is what it is.
Fair enough. Right, I want to try and check the comments because I haven't checked them yet.
Yeah, let's take a look. We've got a few people here. Come to Japan, Kyushu Trail. Hello.
Lots of people.
I hope Dadasoft says I hope Ando gets interviewed too.
Oh, we didn't think about Ando.
I didn't think about that at all. He might stop by.
Yeah, so you came specifically for the language. What was the thing that inspired you to make that change? I think they're referring to when you were talking about when you started learning Japanese.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I specifically came for the language. I specifically came to teach abroad. That's what I specifically came for. And then the language was definitely a major side quest, if you will. But it immediately went out the window when I got here because I was having so much fun. It's a very fun place to come if you're 25 and can make some friends when you get here. So what made me make the change is I lived in a pretty small town. So like outside of the weekends, all my friends lived in the city center, like in Nagano City, and I lived in a town that was 10 kilometers away. So I bicycled in the 10 or 11 kilometers every weekend. But during the week, the only interaction I had with other human beings was my coworkers, there were 3 Japanese women who, you know, they spoke decent English because they were English speakers, but that was it. So like, I wanted to meet people. I was in a different country. I didn't want to just go hang out with my American friends on the weekend. And that's it. Like I was living in Japan, and that's my life. I work 5 days a week, and then I go hang out with my American friends for 2 nights, and then I go back to work, and I never see anyone else. That just seemed like a waste. So that's what sort of knocked me into gear. Like, okay, I need to get down and study so I can actually talk to people around me in my day to day.
Yeah. I find it very interesting how some people can live in a country for a long time and yet never speak the language. For me, that's not possible? Like, I mean, you know, if you're there for like a very short period of time, that's one thing. But if you live there, if you want to integrate yourself,
Right.
and be able to communicate, you know, properly. I'm not even saying making friends if you don't want to, but at least being able to function, have the job that you want, and not be limited by your language skills. I don't know how that is practically possible to not want to learn the language. For me, that's not conceivable.
There's so many things you can't do yourself. Like you have to depend on. It's like you're a child the whole time, which maybe is part of what people like about it, to be honest. Like being able to be like, okay, I have to go do my driving test. Let me just leave that up to other people to set it up for me, and I'll just go do it. It's sort of, and this depends on where you live. If you're living in America, in the United States, and you decide you're not going to learn English at all, it's a little bit harder, I feel like, than it is living in Japan and being like, I'm not going to speak Japanese. It's fine. Because there's lots of Japanese people who want to practice English. So you can make lots of Japanese friends. The thing is that what I've noticed living here is that people in Japan who want to speak English have a personality that is much closer to Westerners in general. Because like maybe they've been abroad, or they're more, I don't know what the word is for it, but open. And so when you speak Japanese to a Japanese person who has no interest in English, it's a very different experience than just meeting Japanese people who want to speak English. It's very different. So you miss out on a lot of different experiences, I feel like, if you don't speak the native language. And some people are willing to go without that, but I wasn't.
Yeah, and for sure. And also speaking the local language just means that you can get interesting interactions with people, you know, like sometimes people will address you in the street, like, you know, make a joke or comment on something they're seeing, and like, you know, it creates a bond, even if it's brief. And I think this is so, like, not to sound cheesy, but I feel like it's quite special, you know. You can exchange banter with a stranger for like 10 seconds. That's amazing, you know.
It is especially when you think about, if you look back, and like I have memories from when I was 23 or whatever, and that guy couldn't speak Japanese, but somehow I'm speaking it right now. Just to everyone around me. It's really cool. And it's like an adventure. I don't know, learning a language, especially before you're fluent, like every day is an adventure when you're living in the other country. Every time you just go to the grocery store, you might have to speak. And it's terrifying, and it's exhilarating, and it's, I don't know, I loved it.
But then when you do it, you feel proud.
Yeah, it's just like, it's exactly what it is. Oh, I did it. Oh my God, I'm still alive.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you ever attend a Japanese language class? And how did you find it?
Just once.
Right.
Once. So it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I had a friend who was trying to learn Japanese, and he wanted my help, and he was having a lot of trouble. It's like there's a volunteer center next to the city hall, which is right down the road, and they have a free Japanese class every, like, once a week, I think it was. So he was going to this free Japanese class, and I was like, okay, well, I'll go to that. It's free, and I'll check it out with you and try and help him in the class. And I went, and I didn't like it.
Why not?
It's hard to express exactly what it was, but, well, for starters, I was way above, like, level wise, everyone in the class and the material they were covering. So that's part of it. But also, it was basically people who couldn't speak Japanese practicing Japanese with people who couldn't speak Japanese. And then there was like 2 or 3 Japanese teachers just sort of walking around the room, because everyone was such different levels, sort of helping them when they could, which is fine, but it wasn't fast track enough for me, I guess. I don't know. It's probably fine for some people, but it wasn't helping my friend very much. And it wasn't enough. I think that was like just that once a week where you had maybe one conversation with another person who wasn't even Japanese. It just didn't seem like it was going to get him anywhere. And it didn't. He still can't, you know, he still has trouble with Japanese. So, and that was 4 years ago. So I wasn't a big fan of it, but I think it is. But I think it depends. Like, that's my only experience. So I imagine there are better courses. Especially if maybe, like, if you start from a 101 course or something and work your way up with your classmates, then you'll all be at a similar level, which is probably better than what I experienced. Just people at all kinds of levels, people that didn't care. It was a little weird.
sounds a bit not strange. I wouldn't say it's strange. Depends on the provision of the school, but it sounds a bit, I don't know, difficult to have students of different levels in a group. I would be very stressed about that. How do you cater for everyone's needs? You know,
you can't. That was the problem, and that's his problem. Is who's he like? If he gets above their level, the other students in the class, but he can only talk to them, how is he supposed to practice new material? He can't. He can only practice that old stuff that those people know. So it was a disaster. It was, but they didn't have much of a choice because it was only like, I don't know, it was like 15 people and everyone was at a different level. So there wasn't much they could do. They only had 2 or 3 teachers. So.
Which is quite a lot. 2 or 3 teachers in a classroom. That sounds like a dream to me.
It is. Yeah. You'd think. But
yeah. It's interesting because
I don't think they really knew what they were doing.
Maybe they didn't. Depends on the training as well, to be fair.
Yeah. Well, it was a volunteer center, so I don't think they were even getting paid for it. So that's probably what the issue was.
Fair enough, yeah. Because sometimes on Twitter and just in general on the internet, people criticize language classes. And obviously I'm a language teacher, so my opinion is definitely biased. But I've also been in a classroom and I've had the experience of both learning, like everyone, right? Also teaching. And sometimes people say like language classes are useless, or maybe they might not say useless, but they will basically say it's not good. It's not, don't do it.
Right.
But actually I feel like, I don't know. I feel like people don't realize that it's not just a language class. You also need to use what you've learned and try to apply it and practice it. It's not just attending a lesson once a week for an hour and a half if you're lucky, or maybe an hour, and then expect to be fluent. Yeah.
I've actually had a complete turnaround on what I believe too. Like, okay, that's my experience with classes, right? So I didn't enjoy that class. And at that time, if you were to ask me, I would have said, Japanese classes are useless. That's what I would have said then, but that's not what I'm saying now. I've sort of had a complete turnaround because I'm also a teacher, and I teach Japanese on live stream to like 30 something people who are also all different levels, right? So obviously I'm biased as well, but what I've come to realize is that it very much depends on the teacher. If the teacher is sort of honest with you and encouraging and inspiring, and tells you, and is what I mean by honest is if the teacher tells you, listen, I'm going to help you all I can, but if you want to get really good at this language, you're going to have to keep doing it on your own. And and doesn't say, hey, once a week in this class and you're going to be magically fluent, because that's not honest, that's a lie. Then I think it can be great. Like I think that can be the motivation people need. And what I've seen, and what really helped me realize this is noticing the types of people here in Japan who can speak English versus the type who can't. And it generally, like if you get down to it, comes down to whether or not they had a good English teacher when they were in school. And it doesn't mean that they learned English well from that teacher. It means that teacher was maybe enthusiastic about the language or anything. They made it fun. Maybe that's all it took. They just made it fun. And then those people came out of that class and said, I want to keep learning it. And they did, and they became fluent. And that's because of the class. It's 100% is. They didn't become fluent in the class, but they did become fluent because of the class. So yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think if the teacher is good.
Yeah. I feel sometimes like enjoying a language class is not so much about, trying to make students fluent. I mean, obviously the end goal is to make them fluent eventually, but I think it's really just giving them and having yourself a positive attitude towards learning.
Right.
I actually have to battle something in me, which is because I'm French, we're very sort of prescriptivist, which means that we're really into the grammar, the proper everything, proper French, etc. But actually, over time, I managed to realize that it's not really that important, and sometimes I just need to let go. And my goal is really to make them speak and try. I mean, obviously, if we're practicing a specific grammar point, I'll correct them on that, but I will try not to correct everything because that's quite demotivating, to be honest. And you can always make a mistake in French. I can correct even native speakers. So it would be unfair to treat my beginner students, against native speaker standards because they're not. So that's not, that's not going to be useful. But I think it's definitely important. What I do is to try to make the class as fun as possible. Honestly, if I do a lesson and I didn't laugh once, it's a failure for me. Because if I don't manage to make it fun, if I don't have the energy to sort of lighten up the mood, then I feel like I failed, honestly.
Yeah, what's the point then?
Yeah. If students are having fun, they will...
Grinding then.
Exactly, yeah, they'll be more receptive. And actually remember reading a study where, being in a relaxed atmosphere makes your learning experience much better. You're more likely to
Absolutely.
retain something, which is obvious. If you're bored, you don't want to, remember
Yeah, if you're
anything.
bored, you don't want to do anything. And if you feel like if I get something wrong, I'm going to be slapped
Yeah,
in the face or something, then
for
you're not going
sure.
to do well either.
For sure,
Yeah,
for sure.
makes sense.
I asked you if you wanted to take the No, you didn't take the JLPT before, have you?
I have.
Oh,
I took the N3 6 or 7 years ago,
right.
probably. Yeah. So I did take it once, and that was enough for me. But
Yeah. So you didn't
yeah,
like
I
it
took.
too
No, I
much.
didn't mind it. I thought it was
Okay.
very motivating.
Hmm.
What happened was I hit a slump in my studying, and I was starting to be able to speak to people, but I knew that I needed to get better. Like it wasn't quite to the point where like I wasn't satisfied with my level, but I also didn't feel like studying.
Hmm.
So I said, okay, I'm gonna take this test as sort of motivation, and it worked for that really well, and it gave me something to sort of focus on. And like when I went into my Skype lessons, it's like, okay, I'm studying for the N3. Can you teach me some grammar from the N3 today, and I'll practice it with you. And it's I had gone so hard for so many months that just sort of becoming a little bit more passive in the learning and sort of absorbing it that way and was what I needed to keep me going. And I passed it with no problem, and I was motivated again because I was like, oh, I could do it, and I was okay. So okay, let's go to the next step. So it encouraged me. I don't think it was a waste at all.
Hmm. And do you think the JLPT is a nice goal to work towards for a learner of Japanese? Like, yeah.
Yeah, it depends on what you're going for, right? If you just want to be able to talk to people, maybe not.
For real fluency, I mean, like for high fluency in the long run, I
Yeah,
guess.
for it depends. If your goal is to work in Japan and to live in, be a translator, like I said earlier, or something, then yeah, you're gonna need it probably. If you literally just want to talk to people about anything, really, it doesn't necessarily need to be low level, then you don't need it to study for it. But if you're a person who has a really, really, really hard time making up your own goals, like making up your own targets for language learning, which can be really difficult, then it can guide you a little bit, I think, because Japanese, I don't think it's worth getting N5 or N4, probably, unless it helps you focus on your studying. In that case, it's probably worth it. But the reason I say going for higher levels like N3, N2 is probably worth it is there's not a whole lot of textbooks past beginner level in Japanese, like Genki, stuff like that. They basically cover N4 to N5, N4 completely. So if you're able to stay focused on those without having a test as a target, then it's not necessary. But if that helps you focus on it, then absolutely do it. I don't see any reason not to.
Fair enough. It reminds me that actually come to think of it, I never actually had an English test or exam ever. The only way I've been
No?
assessed, I guess,
None
is
of
through
them.
my degrees, but I never had a
Okay.
proficiency test ever. And
No.
here I am having an interview in English, right?
Yeah, you're fine. And teaching in England.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think it depends on the person, man. Like if some people are really motivated by tests, and in that case, more power to you. But some people really, really hate tests. And if you really, really hate tests, you shouldn't take the JLPT because it's not going to make you feel any better.
Yeah. Unless you have to for work purposes, but yeah, otherwise.
Yeah. Once again, yeah, absolutely.
My following question is, what were, according to you, the mistakes that you made while learning Japanese? In terms of method,
So
and then maybe we can talk about your embarrassing mistakes afterwards. Because I like those.
all right. A lot of mistakes, man. I sort of made a goal when I started to make mistakes every day. I wanted to make a certain number of mistakes every day. And if I hadn't made that many mistakes in the day, I felt like I hadn't done enough. Like I hadn't worked hard enough or hadn't spoken enough or something like that. I'd feel guilty. I didn't make enough mistakes today. A couple. So I did remembering the kanji, and that wasn't a mistake, but I should have done something along the way that also taught me readings, because when I got to the end of it, and I read, oh, I'm done. I realize I can't actually read anything, even though I spent 6 months on it. It was a little bit like it wasn't discouraging. Like I was excited about finishing it, but I was behind. I felt like where I was my speaking. I was way behind my speaking in my reading because I had spent so much time on speaking while studying, remembering the kanji along with it, that I wish I would have spent more time learning to read the actual words in kanji. That would have worked out better for me, I think. I think something like wani kani now is a really good alternative to remembering the kanji. I think remembering the kanji is still useful, but learning readings and stuff along with it is probably gonna be better in the long run. I'm not sure. That's one of the biggest mistakes I made. But I make mistakes still, man. I went to an interview for my new job.
I want to hear that.
And yeah,
what happened?
So I'm in the interview was less than 10 minutes long, but I got in there and they were telling me about the job, and my friend had the job before me, so she was sort of recommending it. So I was very relaxed. Like I wasn't really worried about it at all. I felt like it was a shoo-in almost. But they were asking me if I had a driver's license. And in case you don't know, driver's license in Japanese is menkyo, that's license. Driver's license is unten menkyo. And interview in Japanese is mensetsu.
Okay.
Menkyo mensetsu.
Okay.
So the guy was asking me if I had a license in Japanese. It was a Japanese guy interviewing me. He didn't speak any English. So he's like, do you have a driver's license? And I was like, oh, yeah. And I go on for about 5 minutes talking about why I don't have a driver's license, but why I'm happy to get one. And the whole time I was saying mensetsu. So I was just saying, no, I don't have an interview, but I can get an interview if you want. Anytime you want, I'll get an interview for you. And then my friend next to me, she's like, menkyo. I'm like, what? Oh no. Oh my God. I'm so embarrassed. Stuff like that all the time.
But did they pick it up, or were they just so confused about what you were saying?
They noted. They knew what I was saying.
Okay.
They knew exactly what I was talking about. That's the funny thing. Japanese people in general, even with a mistake that large, and that's a pretty big mistake. It's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
They won't correct you. If they get what you're saying, they will never correct you.
Yeah. That's something that's quite interesting, is that often people are scared of making mistakes, and something I do in my lessons is that, if there's a word that sounds similar to something else and that will change the meaning, I'm like, usually people will guess what you mean, because usually people are not completely stupid, and people usually try to understand you when you speak their language. So often people are like, oh, why if they don't understand? I'm like, no, it's fine. People will get it. Context is a thing.
Job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So even if I make mistakes, people can usually understand what I mean, even if I phrased it awkwardly, or because I do that all the time. But yeah.
Yeah, no, people are so scared of making mistakes, and it's what keeps most people, I think, from speaking the language they're learning, is because they're really worried, like, oh, it's gonna be so embarrassing if I make a mistake. And it is, but like, I don't know about you, but a lot of the words that I've memorized, the easiest, I memorized because I messed it up somewhere, and it was caused an embarrassing situation, and someone corrected me, like, oh God. And like, I will never ever mistake menkyo and mensetsu ever again. Never will that happen again. So it's a great way to learn, like, at least vocabulary, messing up vocabulary.
Yeah, because you don't want to do it again, the mistake.
No, it's a great way to learn. And nobody cares. Like, nobody cares if you make mistakes. Nobody's worried about it. And like, your point is really great. Like, most people can pick up what you mean, even if you're making a mistake. Yeah. Like, they know what you're saying. And if anyone out there is learning Japanese people, they're amazing when it comes to picking up what you're trying to say, even if your pronunciation is terrible or what you're saying is terrible. Like, context is so important in Japanese that even if you're just saying the completely wrong thing, they generally know what you're talking about, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, because sometimes I think as speakers and even listeners, when we're listening to someone talking, like, we almost, I don't know, it's not conscious, but we sort of almost assume what people are going to say most of the time. Like, the context will sort of, if you say something, you expect the person, I don't know, if you say, it's a nice weather today, for example, you expect the person to reply the same thing or something. Sometimes you can sort of predict roughly really what someone says. And then if they say something completely off, you probably think, oh, I'm guessing, they might have meant this instead or something. So that means that if you come across someone that really don't understand you, Unless, of course, you have such a terrible pronunciation vocabulary that, you know, it didn't actually make sense,
Yeah.
but that's a more extreme context. But usually if people don't understand you, that's on them, not on you.
No,
Like, and I
yeah.
see that all the time.
And
It's, yeah.
yep, I agree. That's a good point, actually, that people are sort of expecting one of a number of answers usually when they ask you a question, any question, I guess. So even if, for example, someone were to ask you a question like, how's the weather? And you said something completely different in English,
Mhm.
like that would throw me off despite being a native English speaker. It doesn't matter if it was, you know, in a different language or not. If I
Yeah.
asked you, how's the weather? And you said blue, I'd be like, wait, what? So it's fine. It's fine. Generally speaking,
Yeah.
people can pick it up.
That reminds me as well of I think it's something that I've learned when I was doing my master's in linguistics, is that made me think about that in a completely different way. But you know, we're always so focused on, you know, make sure your pronunciation is correct, your vocab is as correct as possible, so you make yourself understood. But we don't put enough emphasis on people listening to you. So like what I mean is, like, you know, imagine I'm a non-native speaker of English, speaking to English people. There's always the expectation that should be the one being as clear as possible, while we don't so much expect the listener to make the effort of getting used to different accents, people making mistakes, and all that kind of stuff. Because when you think
Right.
about it, it's a conversation, it's a two-way thing. So why should it be only
Should be.
one person having all the responsibility of making sense, if I may say, and the other person
Yeah,
just
especially
sort
the
of,
learner. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's
And
what
I
it is
think
to be a nice communicator, I think, to be able to understand
yeah,
as well as speak.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think in most cases, like the average person does make an effort to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so like don't worry about it, learners.
Mm-hmm.
Like most people, like if someone, what I always tell people to think about is like if someone comes to them with an accent in their native language, or who's making some mistakes when they're speaking, how do they feel about it? Like, do they care?
Mm-hmm.
Does it bother them? Do they find it really funny and think the other person's stupid? Like, no, they try and figure out what they're saying, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really that uncomfortable. And I mean, it can be, like, if they're completely incomprehensible,
Mm-hmm.
it can be. But if, as long as you have some self-awareness and realize that maybe, for example, you are being completely incomprehensible, so maybe you should just wait to say that thing.
Yeah.
You should be fine. I think the funny thing about learning a language is that you start to find out, like, especially in the beginning, you find out what you actually want to say.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you can say anything, you end up saying a lot of things that aren't really necessary. But when you have a very limited vocabulary and you have to go out of your way to learn to say something,
Mm-hmm.
you realize, I don't really need to say that. I'm just gonna be quiet a lot of the time. So
Would you say in retrospect that Japanese is a difficult language? Or maybe another sub question, what do you think was difficult for you, maybe?
I don't think it's difficult, actually. I think it's significantly easier than, for example, Spanish. And I used to be able to speak Spanish. I can't anymore, but I lost it all of it. But I think Japanese is easier to speak and to understand the grammar and words in particular, much easier. We don't have genders. There's a lot less conjugation rules. There's a lot less exceptions. It's more forgiving, like, and the order never matters really. Like, I can just say a verb alone and it communicates what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, one
You
word
can't
is a
really do
sentence.
that in a lot of language.
Right.
One word is a perfectly fine sentence.
Mm-hmm.
It can be people say that Japanese is subject, object, verb, and it's a lie. That's like the basic form is subject, object, verb. Is that it? Yeah, subject, object, verb. But generally it can be subject, verb, it can be object, verb, it can be verb, it can be verb, object, subject if you use particles, right?
Basically, it's a
So that's
word
actually
language.
really easy. Right. It's words, context. It's very contextual. So when you get used to that, it's really easy. But reading is much harder. Reading is hard, but not like. I remember I saw you have a tweet. Like, was it you? Someone said that someone told them that Japanese, or they read somewhere that Japanese wasn't hard. It just took a lot of time.
I don't think it was me, but yeah.
It wasn't you. Somebody posted that. And the person asked if taking a lot of time and effort to learn something isn't hard, then what is hard? So in that sense, like I don't agree with that person. I think it is hard to learn reading Japanese. Kanji and all hiragana, katakana aren't hard. If you just put a couple hours in, no problem. Kanji and reading in Japanese, it's just so different from spoken Japanese, written Japanese, just wildly different that I still find it pretty difficult. So that's difficult.
And speaking of reading, actually, I've got a question for you. But obviously, I'm a beginner, so I don't know much about reading Japanese. I can't read many kanji yet, maybe a handful. But sometimes you have kanji that have different reading. I'm going to use a simple example, but like the person kanji. So sometimes it will be jin, and the other time it will be hito, right? So how do you know? I mean, obviously, this one may be easier, but in general, for other kanji, how do you know which is the reading when you're reading so spontaneously?
You don't always, and Japanese people don't always. It depends. But generally speaking, you can tell from context. So, for example, we'll use hito and jin. It'll almost only be read hito if it's alone, or if it's alone, like if it's just talking about people. So if it's just that kanji alone. Generally speaking, it's not 100% of the time. But like the other readings are when it's part of a word, like what do you call it, a compound word, so like two kanji together. So if you have a number in the kanji, then it's something totally different, like it's two people is futari. But if you have higher numbers, it's sannin, so it becomes nin, yonnin, etc., etc., etc. So usually I think it's the onyomi is when it's in two words, so two kanji next to each other, right? And if there's hiragana after it, that generally means it's a verb or an adjective, so it's going to be most likely the kunyomi, which is the Japanese reading.
Interesting, didn't know that.
So hito can't be an adverb or adjective or verb, but for other ones, right? So there's going to be that. So yeah, so if it's alone or if it's followed by hiragana, it's probably going to be the kunyomi. And if it's in a word like a kanji compound, it's probably going to be the onyomi. The ones that aren't, you just have to get used to them, memorize them over time.
So would you say this is what makes reading Japanese difficult, to know the reading, or is it just, are you just actually saying just understanding before even reading?
It's mostly the grammar is very different when you're reading than from speaking. It's not like super different, but a novel is going to be I still have hard times with novels. But yeah, kanji is going to make reading difficult all the time. You have to put hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of hours in until you're going to be able to read, just because of the script, right? There's not many languages like that where you need to put thousands of hours of practice in just to be able to actually like read out the sounds of it. There's not many languages like that. So that's the hard part, kanji.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, unless you have the furigana, but that's obviously not always the case.
It's not, no.
Sadly,
most adult geared material don't. Only on words that are like hard to read, or like the ones I said. Like if it's a kanji that is a little bit unusual and also read differently in this one word than it usually is in other places, then it'll have the furigana in even adult geared material. But generally speaking, it won't. So you're kind of out of luck unless you're only reading elementary school aimed stuff.
Yeah, interesting. Good to know. Following question before we have a look at the comments. So I'm going to change the question a bit, but my question originally was, what's your view on watching anime to learn Japanese? But my other question is kind of, how is it actually that different from actually spoken Japanese, and how different it is?
It depends on the type of anime, so, and the type of drama even. So I wouldn't watch a fantasy anime to learn Japanese. Once again, depends on your goal. Like if your goal for learning Japanese is to watch anime, then obviously what you need to be doing is watching more anime. But if you want to use it to learn to speak in real life, you're gonna have some trouble, because generally speaking, even like a day-to-day anime, like what do they call that? Nichijou, like a nichijou. 普通のサイキ系とかなんか学校に行ってるやつだと何のアニメなの？日常系だね。日常系。If you're watching like a 日常系, which is like a day-to-day anime, it'll generally be friends talking, very close friends, which means they're going to be using really, really informal Japanese. And you can use really informal Japanese, but if you're just starting to learn and you're using that for the first time with your teachers or your new friends or your coworkers, they're just gonna laugh at you. That's what's gonna happen. But not like laugh at you. It's just they're gonna think it's hysterical, and you're not gonna end up being able to communicate what you want to communicate. So it can be helpful. And I would recommend that if you are using it to learn to speak, that you do watch those kind, like the day-to-day, like people going to school, people going to work, stuff like that. That's more natural. But if you watch like One Piece, I don't know, pirate Japanese isn't really going to help you that much. And it is quite different.
It reminds me of your Omae wa genki.
Omae wa genki. Yeah. You don't want to be saying
that was quite
like
funny. But
it can be helpful.
Yeah, but I guess I had the same in English as well. I was watching the TV show, I don't know if you know it, but Heroes, quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
So obviously the vocab was like the catalyst and stuff. Like I never used that in real life. So like lots of words are so useless.
Nope.
For sure.
I mean, they'll show up in books and stuff. And once again, if you're watching anime, it's going to show up in other anime. So like, if that's what you enjoy doing, then absolutely use it. But don't let it be your main source of new material, because you'll be sorely lacking in polite Japanese.
Right, let's have a look at the comments. We had to do
That's
TOE. I don't even know, TOEIC, we say in French, to graduate,
TOEIC,
and some schools required TOEFL for a semester abroad, so I ended up doing both. Yeah, the reason why I didn't do any of these things is because I had a degree, and then my degree allowed me to go abroad as an exchange student. And because I had a degree in English, they assumed I could speak English, obviously.
Yeah,
and then I carried on at the same university, and I assume they didn't say that, literally, but they assume if I'd survived for a year in their university, then I was probably mostly fine to keep studying with them. So I think that's how I got away with it.
Probably doable, yeah.
Yeah, but
most people.
Yeah. But technically, I guess my degree is my exam was my degree in itself, which I think proved sense. My level, I guess. So that's probably why.
I think if you can pass university in your target language, you're probably okay.
Yeah, probably okay. Yeah, I've been using Duolingo. I prefer answering the questions quickly, so I do make a lot of mistakes. But I definitely feel I learn better having to recognize and address those mistakes than anything else. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah,
why not? Makes sense.
Yeah.
There's one more question a little higher up. It's Dastasoft. He says, as a gaijin, how do you see friendship with Japanese people? Everyone says it's difficult to maintain friendships.
I love that question.
Relationships. It depends. I don't know if you're still here, Dastasoft, but it depends on what you mean by difficult what kind of relationships you mean. If you mean friendships, I don't think it's difficult at all. I think some of my best friends have been Japanese people over time. Not always. I mean, I think you're always going to have it'll be easier for you to become really close with people who speak your native language. It's just, unless your Japanese is spectacular, like you're going to have an easier time connecting with people that speak your own language. I think that's normal. But that doesn't mean you can't connect with Japanese people. I have lots of good Japanese friends, and I've never had any trouble with friendships. Now, if you're talking about relationships, like, okay, yes, I'm here, friendships too, yeah. If you're talking about like romantic relationships, that can be difficult. A lot of people have a lot of trouble with that, especially if you don't speak the language. But even if you do, you don't realize it your first year or two in Japan. It's if you come here, when you first get here, you're going to be like, it's not that different here. Like, people aren't that different. The places aren't that different. The working culture isn't that different. And then the longer you're here, the more you realize it's very different. The culture, the things people care about in their day-to-day life, they're just different, which makes relationships really hard if you don't have some level of understanding. If you're not willing to make compromises, if you're not willing to, be wrong every once in a while, then you're going to have trouble, because it can be difficult. But it's not, any relationship is difficult. So it's just different difficulties than you're probably used to having in other relationships. But yeah, friendships I've never had trouble with.
I feel like what's maybe difficult in terms of romantic relationships is, obviously the relationship in itself is going to be a challenge anyway.
Yeah,
but also maybe the cultural differences, like the expectations maybe you might have. but also
Right,
the
right.
language as well. When you want to express something very specific, I don't know, things like your emotions, or when you have an argument, you want to explain your point of view. That's kind of like moments where you think, yeah, you see you have gaps in your knowledge, and that's how you learn to even improve your language skills even more.
Yes. The question is, will you improve them in time? And that's not always the case.
Yeah.
It's not always wow, I can't say that word.
Reconcilable?
Reconcilable.
Yeah, I think.
Is that it?
I think.
Reconcilable.
Makes sense to
My
me.
own language. Yeah. I think I know a lot of people who have had a lot of trouble, especially people who haven't studied Japanese, where everyone has fights when they're in relationships. It's inevitable. And if you're not, there's probably something wrong. But the problem, yeah, like you said, when they're having an argument, it's hard to figure out what's wrong or what's going on or how to solve the problem if there is a problem, because you can't talk about it effectively. But yeah, it can be a good motivator. Yeah. It can be a good motivator to fill those gaps for sure.
Interesting. I like that question, actually. That was very interesting.
Yeah, it's a good one.
So
thanks, us off.
Thank you. So you have about 3 more questions. So you already talked about how long you've lived in Japan for, but generally speaking, what's your experience so far? It's a vague question. You can say whatever you want.
All right. How do I feel about... What's my experience so far? I've loved it. Like, I came here intending to stay for 1 year. So that was my goal. I was just going to stay for 1 year, and then I was going to go to like Southeast Asia or something and learn another language or something. But I fell in love with Nagano and, well, Japan in general. And at that time, the culture. And I loved it. Like, I didn't want to leave. So I stayed for, I guess, 5.5, 6 years. And then I left. I left for 1 year. Okay. But then I missed it a lot. Like, I wanted to go back. It felt like I wanted to go home, but to Japan is how much I missed it. I love the food. I love the culture. There's a lot of culture here that is sort of stuff we don't have back in the States. I don't know about it in Europe, but we don't have very much community intact in the States. It's very individualized. So you're family and individual. So like you'll do stuff with your family. Maybe you'll have family traditions, but like community traditions aren't really a thing where I'm from. And that's still a very big thing here, like carrying shrines around town and going to people's houses and singing songs in front of their house every fall, like because they had a baby or something. Like we don't do that stuff. So like stuff like that was really just sort of magical, I felt like, and I really missed it. But working here is a different story. If you don't find a really good company to work for, you're gonna have a hard time. And my past year, I struggled.
What was difficult?
The working culture is very difficult. And the tendency to, when changes are made, to make complete 100% changes and throw everything else out that they used to do. So like the government in Japan made some decisions to sort of change up the educational system a little bit because kids were doing poorly on tests. So they decided they were going to do some more of what's called active learning, which I'm fine with, active learning. But what my school did was, well, the government said we're doing active learning, so now we have to do everything that way. And then they decided on one way that was active learning, and you had to do everything in your class all the time that ridiculous way, which was almost impossible even for native Japanese teachers to do, but absolutely impossible for me to do in English with an immersion class. But like, that's sort of like a microcosm of what happens all over Japan. When we make a change within the company, the whole company changes 100% that way, and everything else that ever happened before was bad. So there's this tendency to want to go 100% in a new direction or not do it at all, which can be really, really frustrating when you're trying to do a job, any job. And
because I guess you get used to a way of working, and then you have to change it all over again.
Well, not even that. Like I love change. It's more that they throw the baby out with the bathwater. Things that worked. I know. I like it too. It worked. Great. Things that worked and didn't need to be changed are thrown out just because they're the old way. Like I like new stuff. I say try new stuff, lots of it. But without trying it, they just do it 100%. Like that's it. We're this new thing that we've never tested, we've never tried, we're actually supposed to just be experimenting with is now the only thing, and everything else is bad. Is a thing that happens a lot here. And the overtime, man. The overtime is the overworking culture is ridiculous.
Did you do that a lot?
We get away with it a lot more. Foreign English teachers and whatnot get away with not doing quite as much, but it's still way more than I ever would have worked anywhere else for free, right? So you don't get paid for overtime generally, which is not really legal.
Yeah, technically illegal where I come from, but
it's technically illegal here too, but it still happens to everyone. You're expected to come in quite early before your day starts, and you're expected to stay quite long after your day ends for nothing. Which just after I worked in New Zealand for a year, that year I was gone, and I realized some of these things. I got some more perspective on them. I'm like, working in Japan kind of sucks. Living here is amazing. And if you find a good job, hold on to it, because they're hard to find and they can be amazing. But you can get some pretty rough ones. But in general, living here is very convenient, and I really like it.
Did you find it difficult to find a job that you actually liked, or that you felt was a good one, good position?
I didn't. So like the job I went back to that I had a lot of trouble with the past year, it was my previous job. I came back to it and I loved it my first time. Like it was awesome. I had a great 3.5 years or 4 years or whatever I was there. It was nice. I liked it a lot, but then they did that whole revamp and it became a different job. Like it wasn't in any way what I was doing before. So that can happen at the drop of a hat. And it happens to a lot of people. A lot of people have trouble. If you can get a job directly with a prefecture or with a city, you're going to have an okay time. You have to be careful with like after school companies and small private companies. It can be a little messy. But if you're careful or if you try and come here with like something, I imagine people listening, if you're interested in Japan, you've heard of Jet, stuff like that, you'll be fine.
I've heard bad things about it. Actually, I think it was a few months ago. There was a tweet, and I think you commented on that tweet, where they were basically complaining about the wage, which was apparently low.
For that was Interact.
Interact. Okay.
So that was a different company, right. And I would not recommend working for them.
Right.
That's an insane wage, especially for where they're sending you.
Fair
but
enough,
Jet is okay. Jet is okay.
Okay. Well, maybe I should do that at some point one day.
Maybe.
We'll see.
Good luck.
Yep, we'll see. I've got more questions. Oh, I should have put that maybe before, but anyway. So any resources that you'd recommend for studying Japanese? You already mentioned a few.
Yeah, I mentioned Wanikani, which is cool. Full disclaimer, I've never used it fully myself. The beta for it was released like a couple weeks after I finished remembering the kanji. So it was sort of... darn. But I have a lot of people like in my Discord and stuff who use it religiously, and they love it. I also have some people who don't love it. So I mean, luckily the beginning of it is free, so you can do like a month or two of it for free. Just like you don't even have to put in credit card information or something. It's just free. The first 3 levels of it are free for anyone. And try it and see if you like it. That one's really, really useful, I think, for learning reading Japanese kanji and stuff.
I tried it.
YouTube is an amazing. Did you?
Yeah, a little bit.
YouTube is an amazing resource now. It was not when I was studying Japanese 7 years ago. There wasn't much out there, but nowadays there's tons of stuff. That's the main thing. I teach from Genki. I recommend it sort of, and I don't recommend it sort of. It's a little bit of a mix.
Why actually? I'm interested to know.
It's poorly written.
Even the newest edition.
The newest edition is better.
Okay.
The newest edition is better, but the content it covers is good. I like the flow of the content. I don't like the English in the book. That's my issue with it. The content is fine. The English is bad.
What's wrong with the English?
It's wordy, unnecessarily wordy, and they go off the rails a lot. They've also come up with some of the grammar points. They've come up with some of their own ideas, I feel like, that are problematic. One of my most viewed videos is a lesson that's on that, which the majority of people who come into my like Discord and stuff come from that lesson, because they everyone gets stuck on that lesson. Then they search that lesson on Google or whatever, and that
Nice.
comes up, and they're like, "This makes more sense." But any beginner's textbook that has you completely stumped, and I know I've heard of so many people quitting Japanese because of that lesson on lesson
wow.
3. That's just, but it is a good structure. Like the flow of the lessons lead you into speaking pretty well, I think. So I do use it. But the reason I started teaching it was because it was so poorly written in the beginning. But the 3rd edition is better than the 2nd edition. I will say that.
Good to know. Yeah. And I guess any textbook, no textbook will be really perfect. But what I like about textbooks personally is that it gives you a structure. So it might be that there's a lot of questions that will go unanswered for you, but then you can, consult other resources like, YouTube and just Googling in general. But I like textbooks. A lot of people say, oh, it's boring and stuff. You need to be speaking or whatever. But I love textbooks. Like they give nice structure.
I like them too. Gives you an idea of where to go next. Like I said, I used this. This is it's a grammar dictionary.
I've seen it. It's quite expensive, right? It's like 3,000 yen.
3,000 yen.
Yeah, I remember seeing it in Japan.
But I mean, it's a brick.
It is.
But
I almost bought it.
So I used this in the beginning.
I might.
It's good, but so I use this in the. This is what I use in the beginning. This is all I use. I didn't use a textbook at first because I didn't like any of the textbooks I found in Japanese. But the problem is like you said, the structure. You don't really know what you need next if you're just looking at a book like this. And what a textbook tends to do is it gives you the little bit of the signposts of where to go next. And Genki definitely did that the best of it. Like I've looked at a lot of the different textbooks, and a lot of them are just bad. Some of them are passable, but I didn't like them very much personally for myself.
What do you think made them bad? And you can name them if you're comfortable doing that.
Like actual mistakes, legitimate mistakes.
All right.
That even I, as a beginner, could pick up. Like, if I'm a beginner and I'm picking up mistakes, then clearly this wasn't written by a person who knew what they were talking about. And I don't just mean like typos. I mean like legitimately major mistakes, like wrong words, wrong grammar, stuff like that. I don't actually remember all of the ones I was reading. A lot of ones used a lot of romaji that just got annoying after a while. Like they didn't use hiragana; they would only use romaji, which I didn't like personally. It wasn't like
I hate romaji.
I don't like it. It's very hard to read. But
it really is. It sounds like it should be simpler because that's your native alphabet, but it really isn't.
You would think, but it's not. It's terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, reading hiragana alone is also not great, but romaji is so much worse. Oh my god.
Yeah. For sure. Then, final question. Any funny anecdotes or funny stories about your life in Japan? You already gave one about your job interview, but have you got others?
Funny stories. Off the top of my head, that was one of a good one. But if you ever come to Japan, I don't know if this is a funny story. It's just a funny thing that I want you guys all to try if you ever come here is you have to go to karaoke. And I know you like karaoke.
I do.
But what you might not know about karaoke in Japan is that if you go to the front desk after you've gotten in, you can borrow costumes.
Oh.
And not just any costumes. Like there's like maid costumes and the typical stuff you'd expect here, but there's also like giant dinosaur costumes and like cartoon character costumes. And it can be really fun to like sneak off to go to the bathroom with a couple people. If you're there with like inevitably, if you're just visiting, you're going to be there with like 10 people or something. Sneak off with 3 or 4 people, all throw on some costumes and then run back into the room and start like dancing around. There's way too many pictures of me on the internet in costumes that I should never have been in. But I highly recommend costume karaoke.
That's funny.
If you can ever do it. Yeah, no.
I've been to karaoke, but I wasn't aware of that.
No, not every place has it, but most places do actually. They don't like shout it out at you, but you'll see like a little sign over in the corner that has like all the costumes that they have in the back. It's pretty funny.
Nice one to know. I had no idea about this. Right, let's have a look at the comments again. Jet is sponsored by the Japanese government and fairly good salary, and they pay on time. Some bad private companies won't pay you if business is bad. That's not good, yeah. But Jet is extremely competitive worldwide. Hundreds of thousands of people apply, and only a couple hundred are chosen. Yeah.
I didn't know it was that many. Wow.
I think I tried to, well, I didn't try to apply, but I wanted to apply, but they're very strict in terms of they want native speakers, if not someone that's been educated in the language for 12 years. And I'm like, that's a long time. I don't feel like
Wow.
12 years is necessary. Like 5 years would be enough, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know what they
Especially if it's
base that
university
number
level.
on. So that means I don't think I fit the criteria. But I'm like, surely my English is good enough and my pronunciation is far from being like disgusting. So like,
Now you'd be fine.
I don't know. Yeah, it is the
No,
way it is. But yeah, I think for non-native speakers, it's actually quite difficult to apply through
I
English
think so.
programs. And then in France, there's like, I think there's like 3 applicants or something. And maybe not, maybe a bit more, but it's like a ridiculously low number.
Very low number.
So yeah, I might as well not apply. Like, I guess maybe.
There's other good places. I would personally. It's a little bit hard when you're abroad. Like the best thing
suppose
is
so,
to get
yeah.
like a little simple job and then try to find something better after you get here.
Mhm.
It's the best bet, really.
Yeah.
Just find a company that people sort of has good reviews. Get in there and then look around in your local area. After that, yeah, okay. Yeah, let's take a short little break and we'll continue from here.
Yeah. So see you later, guys, and thank you for joining so far. And don't forget to join in about, let's say, 10 minutes.